Blasphemous is a new 2D Metroidvania where you essentially play as an Abyss Watcher set in a world ripe with dark religious themes, excellent combat, phenomenal world design, and an exciting array of bosses. Also, insta-death spike pits. A lot of insta-death spike pits!
I hope you like platforming.
My 11 hours spent in this twisted world was well worth it, so today I want to share with you my thoughts on the difficulty of its bosses. Without further ado, here are the Blasphemous bosses ranked from easiest to hardest. Number 10, Warden of the Silent Sorrow. It would take a special kind of joke to be an easier affair than the Warden. Designed as a tutorial for the game's combat, this fight takes place less than 5 minutes into your playthrough. If you die, the game even gives you a tip on how dodging works within the game, so even though this suggests you are intended to die, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you made it through unscathed. The combat in Blasphemous is nothing new, but it is a solid take on 2D melee combat. You can slash with your sword, jump, and even have a dash that allows you to dodge through attacks or even the enemy itself with proper timing. The Warden's first attack, his slam down that puts out a shockwave, can be handled either by jumping or dashing through him. His only other attack is to leap in an attempt to crush you, which is encouraging you to learn to dash away. He will consistently cycle back and forth between these two attacks while leaving you reasonable windows to get your own in. It's extremely basic and by far the easiest boss in Blasphemous, but it's an appropriate learning tool, and I'll never argue with spicing up a tutorial with a boss battle. Number 9, Crisanta of the Wrapped Agony. Considering Crisanta's placement in the game as a last line of defense before making it to the game's conclusion, I expected a daunting duel ahead when I saw the stature of this female knight. She certainly has a strong wing and fast attacks, but it's mitigated by another combat mechanic, the parry. Parrying in Blasphemous has very generous timing. With a hit of a button, you hold up your sword. If the enemy hits at any time while the sword is up, you parry their blow. The wind up on the parry is extremely fast, making it easy to strike then parry in an instant. This trivializes what would otherwise be quite the intense battle. She can do a jumping slash that has AoE flames, she can do 2 slashes that span nearly the entire arena and do massive damage, but again, you're unlikely to see this because you'll be laughing while parrying for days. In a dose of irony, she can parry you as well, but all you do is parry her right back. You can even use a sword ability that increases your parry window, making it even easier. At 50% HP, she will buff, fly around like crazy, then land for you to strike. She'll give you time to hit 2 to 3 times, after which she'll either hit for a parry opportunity or zip around some more. Hilariously, you can even parry these attacks, but it's not worth the risk in my opinion because they are fairly quick and they're easy to dodge anyway. Thanks to all that parrying, this would-be challenging foe becomes one that can barely edge out a tutorial boss with 2 moves. So even though I think the fight would be a doozy without it, the reality is Crisanta is merely an exercise in allowing the player to shirk their blasphemous ways by becoming a parry god. Alexa, play Exposito.
Okay.
If the giant blindfolded baby doesn't throw you for a loop, perhaps the demonic tree snake looking like something out of a Monty Python animation will. Once you get past their bizarre appearance, we come to the fight, which is honestly just as weird. I feel as if this entire fight was a frantic blur. I meandered around, did my best to position myself away from the tail strikes, fireballs, and poison spit, and then exorcised the demon by smacking the hell out of its face and weak point. All the attacks ranging from the baby crying and calling tail strikes to fireballs, poison spit, the snake lunging at you, and firing root crap at you. All of this can be troublesome if you have bad positioning, but I was able to stand inside of it and tank damage while killing it. This was my first and only boss I beat on my first attempt, and while it was a photo finish, at least in my experience, it was the easiest outside of the less nuanced bottom dwellers. Number 7, Ten Piedad. Being the second boss I faced after the Warden, Piedad adds a nice level of complexity to the mix. He has 4 moves: a swipe downward that can be jumped over or slid away from, a stomp that allows you to get behind him, also spawning roots that pop up out of the ground. He'll turn toward the screen and summon rows of roots, and he fires out arced root bombs that leave behind brush that he or you can destroy. The amount of the roots that spawn increases as you damage him more. This creates a looming tension to end the fight quickly, but you're forced to balance your aggression in order to avoid taking hits, because unlike the Warden, this fight goes on long enough that taking damage is problematic. That said, it's not as if the fight is overly difficult, it's merely a solid step in a more challenging direction. Number 6, Tres Angustias. As is par for the course, I'm pretty sure I butchered that name, but one thing that won't get butchered here is you. That's because we're still quite deep into easy territory even as we approach the halfway point. The main challenge here is climbing the continuously moving level. Depending on the current layout, you may have more trouble dodging certain attacks, but stabbing the side of the level is always an option. As you ascend, the boss will pick away your health slowly, but when on land, it's quite easy to dodge their few attacks. They can merge and fire off a big beam, they'll shoot lightning, or shuffle their balls. The thing is, none of this amounts to enough damage to outlast your healing. Once I understood their attacks, I primarily focused on scaling the level and dealing out damage, choosing to tank and heal whatever they could dish out. If these bosses did more damage and were tankier, this fight could be brutal, but as it stands, Trey Angustius is nothing more than a middling adversary. Number 5, Our Lady of the Charred Visage.
And now, to destroy the Leyland system!
Andros over here has been rotten for some time, so it's reasonable to assume he might not be up to difficulty snuff. But I have to say, this is where the game takes a solid leap forward in that regard. Much of the difficulty in 2D melee-based games comes from positioning. With that in mind, a natural way to pump up the difficulty is to load up the screen with dangers so that the safe spots to position yourself are limited. Andros accomplishes this by firing off a few attacks from his hand, including a telegraph purple beam, various combinations of magic shots, and glowing orange orbs that you can slap back at the boss for some nice damage. This is all easy enough to manage despite putting solid pressure on you. What elevates the challenge is a 50% HP when hand 2 tags into the fight. Double the trouble is putting it lightly when you consider how limited your room to maneuver becomes when magic is flying wildly. And of course, placing the focus on evasion means less time hitting the boss, meaning a longer fight, meaning more chances to take damage yourself. With the margin for error decreasing as the fight goes on, speed is key here. Fortunately, there is a point where the head flies down the middle and lets you unload. As long as you take advantage of that key moment and save your healing resources for the second half, you'll down him with a reasonable effort. Number 4, Melchiade, the Exhumed Archbishop. In contrast to the previous fight, the Archbishop is geared toward endurance and patience. He only has 3 types of attacks. A number of hands will come up from below and slap you around. He summons a number of long-lasting vertical light beams, and he'll hit you with his beating stick. The goal is to damage all the hands holding him up so that you can skull fuck him. Problem is, the hands take a decent amount of damage, and his head is tankier than you'd expect. Because of this, the fight is a test of endurance. Under normal circumstances, this might not be a problem. His move pool is limited, so in theory it should be easy to avoid most if not all of his attacks. The issue lies in how much he flies around the arena and how lightning quick he is with that beating stick. You might think you position yourself well between attacks to dish out your own, and then suddenly you're getting pummeled. These unsuspecting hits take a toll over the course of the fight, draining your resources and making a simple fight on the surface much harder than it first appears. Number 3, Esdras of the Anointed Legion. This fight emphasizes just how valuable the dodging slash move can be. Not only was it a great way to close the distance between you and Esdras, who loves to zip back and forth across the bridge, but it also did damage and took quick advantage of windows he would leave after moves. At the start, he spins around the arena a lot, dropping lightning to avoid. He'll mix in melee and even an AoE blast at close range. This makes the dodge slash all the more valuable as you can get in and out quickly while dashing behind his melee attacks for an even greater punish. As his health reduces, he'll summon lightning in waves in front of himself and speeds up, but the real fight begins at 33% when he brings in a mini-boss to gank you. Although she may only lunge at you in a well-telegraphed manner, it's an extra layer that is more than enough to tip the scales out of your favor. His attacks at the start may be clear, but that doesn't mean they're always easy to avoid. They're strung together quickly and the downtime decreases as the fight goes on. This comes to a head with the gank at the end, and even if you find a healing window during that chaos, it'd be difficult to take advantage of it. Instead, you'll have to put on your dodge and pants, position well, and strike while the iron's hot to claim victory against this daunting duo. Number 2, Quirst, Returned by the Flames. If we were going by the success of my initial attempt, Quirst would run away with the title of hardest boss in Blasphemous. For many of the bosses leading up to him, I was mostly able to fart around without too much strategy other than using healing to out-tank foes while I darted around with my dashing slash. But in this case, Quirst is the one with the zoomies. In a way, he reminds me of Nightmare King Grim from Hollow Knight. He's nowhere near as difficult, but of his limited handful of attacks, each requires you to dodge in a specific way. If you execute, you get a great window to attack at best, or at least save your HP, which is important because compared to most bosses in the game, he has very little downtime between attacks. Of his attacks, he can throw his sword, which I countered by waiting to see how the throw would arc, then slashing him on the ceiling. This was also one of the few opportune times to heal, as he does hang up there for a bit. If he does the dash across the arena leaving behind flame tornadoes, run to the opposite side and jump to dodge everything and be in position for the punish. Once he throws the sword into the wall, you have to watch for his charge. After doing it twice, he'll give you a few seconds to hit him. Same with his jumping slams. He'll do 3 or 5 depending on how low his health is, and after doing them, he'll leave you a short window to attack. The one thing here that is pretty bullshit is that if you get hit by one slam, as far as I could tell, you weren't able to recover fast enough to get away from the next one, so it could spell instant death or at least a huge chunk of HP lost. Finally, be careful for his fire tornadoes multiplying when his health is lower, and watch for him spamming them in front of him as well. All of this added together makes up some of the most complex mechanics of any boss in the game, and when you consider how quickly it's all strung together, it's far more demanding than most of what the game has to offer. But there's one final boss that takes those demands to the next level. And the #1 hardest boss in Blasphemous, his Holiness Escibar and the last son of the Miracle. There's no delicate way to put it, so instead of me speaking, let's hear what the boss has to say.
I curse you forever in name.
He sounds like he has the constitution of someone who lives off porridge while shitting in their depends. That is to say, he is laughably weak, even weaker than the Warden, but I guess that's the point. He only serves as a tool to teach you the different kinds of magic you can expect from the real hardest boss, last son of the Miracle. The only miracle here is that I didn't flip over my desk in frustration while facing this absolute unit of magical dog shit. Outside of Quirce, no boss in the game took me more than 3 attempts. Even Quirce only took me 6 before I learned to meter my aggression and actually dodge like I'm not an overly greedy buffoon. But this bastard took me 15 attempts, and might I add that unless the perfect storm strikes, it's likely to be the longest boss fight in the game. Of my 11-hour playthrough, I spent 70 minutes here. That means 10% of my entire game time was spent duking it out with this metal maniac. And why is that? You know how I mentioned that positioning and space to dodge is key? Well, let's just say the last son has a lot going on. For starters, the eyeball sword floating around is a key to damaging it. 3 hits and open sesame goes the face for a short time. To reach it, you'll need to deal with randomized platforms. They will periodically phase in and out during the entire fight. But oh no, you can only jump so high and far, so you have to rely on luck as to where they show up. Adding to that, jumping slashes aren't nearly as good as a full combo, so it's a trial in tankiness unless you're lucky enough to make it to the rare platform that spawns next to his face. During all of this, you'll have to deal with variations on attacks that Escibar had. Lightning waves, green orbs, purple beams, giant purple beams that take up half the goddamn screen, fireballs that rain so hard they can kill you in a heartbeat while you're out of position. It's quite overwhelming in addition to trying to hit the damn boss while hopping from platform to platform. And in the later half, he picks up his attack speed. Compounding on that and adding more to the luck factor, all of his attacks aren't created equal. Some, like the green orbs, are easy to deal with, while the fireballs require such precision to avoid that you'll be hard-pressed to come out unsinged. You can of course win regardless, but the difficulty will vary based mildly on luck and massively on skill. No matter what way I look at it, there's no doubt in my mind that the last son is the hardest boss in Blasphemous. But of course, that's just my opinion. What bosses in Blasphemous did you find to be the easiest and hardest? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe for more boss rankings throughout the game release bonanza that is fall, and check out the top 100 games of all time to pay respects to those that transcend time. I want to thank you all for watching today, much love to you, and I'll see you in the next video.